Welcome to another edition of the Chief Audit Executive Briefing. Hey, this last week, I actually did a webinar on risk-based internal auditing and had a huge amount of people that signed up for the webinar, a lot of interest in this particular area. So I wanted to share with you this week and maybe a little bit next week, just a little bit more about risk-based internal auditing. Now, as a chief audit executive, I'm sure you might be thinking, well, I already understand that. But here's what I find when I talk with organizations, is usually organizations fall into one of three different categories, okay? The first one is they're just not doing risk-based auditing at all. They're really doing kind of traditional compliance auditing, maybe some financial or financial control related things. And they don't even worry about or try to say that they're doing a risk-based approach. They may try to prioritize what they're doing, but they openly and honestly admit they're not really doing a risk-based approach. Okay, so that's one category. There's another category of people where they're doing risk-based auditing and they want to try to improve, what they're actually doing. And so they are taking that approach, but they just want to kind of get better as they're going along. Now, the third group is the group that thinks that they're doing risk-based auditing, but when you dig in a little bit deeper, they're actually not. And so I find that actually a lot of people fall into that particular category. They're developing an audit universe, they're ranking it, they're thinking that they're picking things that are higher risk. But ultimately, when you start your audit universe with things that do not relate to risk or to the key objectives of the organization, your ending audit plan will never ultimately be risk-based. Because risk-based auditing is focusing on those risks that relate to key objectives in the organization. And so, like I said, I've seen lots of people usually kind of fall into that third camp. They think they're doing risk-based auditing, but they're really not. So that was one of the reasons why I did the webinar. Now, if you missed that, I'm including the link down below so you could go back and take a look at that recording and kind of see what I talked about there, because I can obviously go in much more depth than I can in just a couple minute video here. But the other thing that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of is if you missed the first webinar, I'm doing a follow-up deeper dive on that particular topic on October 31st. So even if you missed the first one, you can go ahead and register for this upcoming webinar. And it's free, so I'll again include the link down below as well so that you can register and hop on to that one. Now, in that particular webinar, I'm going to go deeper in on certain topics based on questions that people have about a risk-based internal audit approach. So if you have questions about that as well, go ahead and reply to this email. Let me know what those questions are so I can try to address those during the webinar. The other thing is we're going to do a live question and answer session as part of this. So again, as part of it, you can actually submit your questions directly on the webinar as well, and we'll take time to answer that. So it's going to be an hour and a half format, so a little bit longer to make sure that we can answer everybody's questions. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about this week is risk-based internal audit, and I'll talk to you on the next edition of the Chief Audit Executive Briefing. Have a great rest of your week.